Hey everyone, Phreak here. Let's talk about Dungeons & Dragons and the new campaign I'm playing in. A quick update on one of the previous campaigns I was giving recaps on. I guess the only one I was giving recaps on. That one actually collapsed. We didn't have a lot of players, nor really a lot of activity, so attendance ended up being spotty, and eventually it just kind of broke down and we went our separate ways. But because of that time it freed up in my schedule, I started a new campaign with a bunch of people who work on NALCS, most of them being on-camera talent, but not all of them. And I'm DMing. And it's my first time DMing a real campaign. I've done one-shots before. I know the game pretty well, but as far as actually running a campaign, it's my first time doing it, and hopefully I do all my players justice. In general, most of the people playing, including me, are fairly new to the game, though not all of us are, but a lot of us are within kind of 1 year of playing D&D. And the way I want to do these recaps, actually, is do it more from the perspective of the player as opposed to the DM. I don't want to pull the curtain back too much, except in retrospect, to kind of give you an idea of what could have happened or what could have been. But I kind of want to keep the twists and turns that are there for the players, and keep them as twists and turns for you as well. With that out of the way, let's get into the campaign. So there's 7 players, and they are, as you can see right beneath my face, a high elf fighter named Baguette Darkmoon. It's great because, so we're playing in the Forgotten Realms, very sort of standard, like Adventurers League, current era, that sort of place, and we're by the... We're over by the Sword Coast and you know, present year, etc. What's cool though is some of the players actually went and did a lot of research into the actual history of Forgotten Realms and their place within it. And so Baguette is one of those, where he's a 70-year-old high elf, which puts him as still sort of a child in elven eyes. You know, has yet to sort of have his transition, his rite of passage or whatever into adulthood. But he initially, or his family, comes from the Isles of Evermeet off the western coast, way back over there. About 100 years before the current setting, there was a big insurrection there. Some demon fae showed up and basically took over the place. And the Darkmoon family, lesser nobles as they are, in a quest for power, gave up some information and helped transition those demons in. People found out, they were banished, and they're now up on the main countryside. So he hails from Everesca, which is mostly known for wood elves, and they're off to the sort of the far northeast of the campaign setting, but still inland. And so he grew up around a bunch of wood elves, but he's a disgraced noble high elf, and his sort of goal is to adventure out and regain some semblance of nobility to his family name, which is great because it gives him an adventuring hook, and it gives me a lot of ways to tempt him into doing cool stuff. The little bit of the curtain I will pull back is to say that I'm intending to tempt him to choose between the greater good and getting a reward, essentially, where, you know, maybe there's a very sort of evil nobility, but they're happy to give you a writ of excellence or something. You know, they're not outwardly evil, but you can tell, oh, they're keeping slaves or something, or they have a torture kingdom, or, you know, who knows what they're doing. Something bad, right? Something that you wouldn't like. And he wants to be a good character, maybe a chaotic good or a neutral good. And say, hey, well, you've got to choose between rebuilding your name and doing the right thing. And that's the kind of things I'm probably going to test him on later on. That's Baguette's overall story. It's great because he really plays up the nobility aspect, and we'll get into that as we do some more recaps. The next one is Brother Olohand, a halfling monk. He's a whole bunch of fun. We decided that he has a Scottish accent, and so the player gives a Scottish accent when he talks about it. That backstory, basically, he's just sort of a wastrel who he's going to turn into a drunken master as a subclass. And he's just, you know, some dude who got into tavern brawls a lot, which is kind of this fighter person who just threw hands a bunch, but didn't have much going for his life, just kind of was there, tavern hopped and whatnot. And he was brought into a monastery, a monk monastery, to give him some refinement into his life. And he's like, well, I don't really have anything better going on, so yeah, sure, whatever, I'll just join the monkhood, become a better fighter because, you know, whatever, you know, brawl a bit better. But one day his sensei went missing, and now he's off to adventure to figure out what's going on. That is pretty much the sum total of his backstory, and that's fine. I mean, we're going on a general epic quest. This is generally going to be a bit less individual player story driven, but for those who have invested into their individual character backstories, I'm going to try to give back on those. And so he's just kind of trying to figure out who his master is. I actually have now figured out who his master is, or not who he is, but where he is. I have figured out who his master is, where he's going to find him, probably the kind of thing is going to happen. So I'm kind of ready to go with Brother Olahand. Should be exciting. He's overall like a really sort of jovial, funny sort of character. We'll get into some of the stuff he's done later. I keep wanting to like talk about the things that the characters have done, but we can get to that when it actually happens. Next up is Endry. First name Erwin, though he hasn't told anyone that, so it's just Endry to everybody. And he is a mechanically draconic bloodline sorcerer. He's aligned with, I forget if it's white or silver dragons, but either way, it's ice. And so, you know, he got Ice Knife at level 1, and he uses Ray of Frost for his cantrip. He's very, very cold-based, and that's cool. He is a human-looking, just sort of generic dude, essentially, who also comes from nobility. He's very, very selfish, very haughty, doesn't want to get his hands dirty really at all, if he can help it. But overall is... well, he's got his own quest, and this is one that most of the other players don't know, and so, or at least the other characters don't know, so we're going to kind of wait on that one, but we'll figure it out over time. I know it. I'm going to save it. It's a pretty cool story. I like it a lot. Either way, he's got this sort of draconic bloodline, so there's certainly this aspect of having very special ancestors, and that's kind of part of what he's going to play up overall. Next up is the Half-Orc Paladin Groklo Machno. What's great is the art for him actually just comes from the player's handbook, I'm pretty sure. So that's a pretty generic one right there, but a Half-Orc Paladin. At level 3, well, it doesn't matter. I'll give away subclass because who really cares? He's a Paladin of Conquest. He's very much might makes right. If I take you down, I deserve it. If you take me down, you deserve it. Wants to kill things, does not want to leave survivors. Still wants to be... I'm not sure if he's good or just pure neutral, but very much wants to be an aspect of fighting and warriors and killing things, and he's going to pray to the god Tempest, the true neutral god of war, and he is all about that. So he's, I mean, and you know, it's a little bit generic, but that's what the player wants. He wants to kind of go in and just screw stuff up and do a bunch of damage, and Conquest Paladins are very much that. So that's his character. He's very aggressive, willing to like retreat if needed, willing to talk if needed, but you know, wants to kill stuff, and that's absolutely fine. Of course, you're allowed to be that, even if that's like a little bit simple in like haughty D&D terms, like it matters. He's great. Next up is the character unironically named Jesus 2.0, who is a human death cleric praying to Kelemvor, the true neutral god of death. The backstory he gave, I don't know if it was in character or to players, but either way, the backstory that we all know, he was pretty big thief, just sort of generic, obvious jerk, lawful evil, maybe chaotic evil, maybe just neutral. Either way, he was an evil character in his first life, and he died. And for reasons that I believe are unknown to him, he was resurrected and brought back to life by the god of death, Kelemvor. Not as an actual undead, because Kelemvor hates undead, but back to life as a human. But the sort of contract being that you need to now be a cleric to my needs. And so I get to kind of chew on what exactly Kelemvor wants out of him, and sort of reading into that deity and his past life before he rose up to godhood, what he likes as a god now, how much am I willing to rewrite, because every D&D campaign is its own little pocket of the multiverse where you can change whatever you want, and I'm probably going to take some liberties with Kelemvor as a result. Either way, a resurrected thief who now has to become a cleric and become good, and in the words he sort of gave me, in the eyes of the party, he wants to look very lawful good. When no one's looking, he wants to be very lawful evil. And in the end, he'll probably end up somewhere in the middle. But, you know, he needs to kind of keep up appearances. He needs to sort of just do enough to keep Kelemvor happy. But he, as a player and as a character, wants to really grapple with what I can really do about that. And what he can really do about that, and how different can the character be. And so I'm going to have to try to find ways to tempt him to turn back to evil and make that exciting. And that's going to be a test for me and a test for the player, and hopefully it'll be good. Next up is Modella, the gnome. Now, mechanically, she is a rock gnome, but we reflavored it as a trash gnome, a gnome more or less born of trash, living out in the dingiest parts of society. Modella's really interesting because she is a very sorry, Medell has a lot going on, basically. So she is an amnesiac, so she doesn't remember her past life at all before adventuring, which is up to about now. And also, for extra fun, has short-term memory loss, and so as much as the player wants to play it, she might forget what happened the previous day adventuring. This is up to the player, though. I'm not going to, hold Modella to, forgetting what happened in the previous session, and I'm also happy with, players, walking back part of the backstories just to figure out who they want to play. Modella actually, her player is one of those who are actually very new to D&D. This is their first time playing, and so there was a backstory given, but nothing as far as mechanically what they wanted to do. And so I took on a bit more work to essentially flesh out the mechanics and do a lot of the choices for Modella's player. So Modella is a rogue. At 3, Modella took Scout because it's the easiest rogue subclass. Essentially, rogues don't have a lot of mechanics they have to use, right? There's movements, actions, and bonus actions. There's no spells. There's no secondary resources. Modella was still an urchin and knows Thieves' Cant by being a rogue and has a whole bunch of skill proficiencies and is expertise in thieves' tools and a bunch of other stuff and has all the rock gnome tinkering stuff. But the actual character of Modella is not actually built optimally for a rogue. Modella's highest stat is intelligence, for example. Dexterity is only, I think, 15 at level 1, for example. So that's pretty low as well, I think, because rock gnomes go +2 int +1 con or something like that, so can't even get +3 to damage at the beginning. Thankfully, rogues just rely on, sneak attack for all the damage, so it's going to be fine. But yeah, essentially, Modella doesn't have a backstory, or she does, but doesn't know it. And so it gives me a completely blank slate to write what Modella is about, what she's going to encounter. And it's been kind of fun, actually, because on the one hand, you have characters who know what they want, but there's not a lot given. There's characters who know what they want, and there's a lot given. And there's characters who don't know what they want at all, but it's a ripe landscape. And so I have kind of all the above here, and that's kind of interesting. So Modella doesn't know where she's from. I do, and she'll be learning that pretty soon. And what she's about. For now, she's adventuring. And the final final character in our campaign is Val Galandan, the Wood Elf Ranger. Yes, the pretty much most normal class anyone ever comes up with. Val is also a first-time player. And overall has taken a really big liking to the game. Super exciting player to DM for. Either way, Val is a ranger. It's funny because the player came in expecting to do the double short sword, stabby melee version of Ranger, and then within the first sort of day of fighting ended up using the longbow a lot more, and then at level 2, Rangers decided fighting style, and he had to figure out if he was going to be a 2-weapon fighting or an archery fighting style Ranger. The player chose archery, and so Val Galandan is now Val is now an archer. And that's cool. And being a new player can be a little bit weird learning or sort of abilities. Made the same mistake that everyone does, which is, at level 2 I learned spellcasting. Let me look up 2nd level spells. No, sorry, at level 2 Rangers learn 1st level spells because well-designed terminology. Holdovers. Either way, he's very much a from the swamps, recently new to the adventuring life. Not sure why he's here in canon yet. That hasn't really been given. But really, really, really eager to prove himself. He jumps he scales everything he can. He's always looking to climb out of the high ground to look cool. He's trying to get away with his as awesome and amazing as maneuvers as possible. And I try to let the Vol get away with that within reason. But within reason, I try to be pretty fair to the rules. And overall, just a showboat hotshot marksman, and that's been pretty fun as well. Okay, so these 7 adventurers have come together, and the essentially rule I gave everyone was, hey, look, you all have to be characters who are willing to adventure. If your character wouldn't just take a quest, this is not a character that you're going to be able to play in this campaign because you're going to have to take quests. So just get past that already. By DM fiat, you're all going to be adventuring. That is one thing that I think everyone needs to just like do when they make a character, is your character should be willing to adventure. You can role play why you should be friends or not, and why you're, rolling together at a certain point, but you should be willing to take adventures on. Otherwise, why play this game? Or at least why play that character in this game? I try to be pretty conscious of the rules. I try to make the rules matter, because that way your actions have like proper consequences. But I will try to let you try to do something. I'm okay saying no, but I'm also okay saying, yeah, well, the DC for this is 20 because what you're trying to do is very difficult. And if they hit it, then great. That's basically how I'm running that. I'm half and half running the NPCs properly, half of them just sort of describing what happened in third person. Anyway, let's get into the very first session of our campaign. So the 7 adventurers are traveling up north down a side road. They had all heard that there was adventure to be had and maybe quests to be taken in the town of Nightstone. Nightstone is only a few miles away from 2 of the bigger cities, I believe, Waterford and Daggerkeep. Daggerford and Waterkeep? Either way, I've already forgotten. Either way, those are towns that are already known on the southwest Sword Coast. And up inland a little bit to the northeast is the town of Nightstone. And they had heard that there was adventure to be had there. And they come across, as we draw out the town of Nightstone, sort of like this, with a bridge and a keep down at the bottom. There's a drawbridge over here. And all of this is running water. This is all a moat. Look at my beautiful drawing of the town of Nightstone. We're not going to change this ever. We're going to be drawing in GIMP forever in this campaign. And then, here's the road, right? Cool. So they're traveling up this road, and they come across the town of Nightstone. There's a bright white drawbridge, and suddenly my face is more heavily lit because there's a bunch of white pixels on my screen now. They come across the town of Nightstone. Nightstone has some guard towers, kind of up here. Around the corners, the drawbridge is down, and they hear this loud ringing of a bell, just dong, dong, over and over and over again. It's not getting quieter. It's not calming down. It's coming from inside the town. And they're like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. They walk up to the drawbridge. It's mid-afternoon still, maybe, let's say 4 p.m. And they're like, okay, well, this is interesting. We already knew we were coming. That's weird. The bell is ringing. Let's walk in. And as they walk in, they walk across the drawbridge, and they notice a couple of wolves, wargs, feasting on some canine corpses. And they go, oh, that's exciting. Okay, they're just, chewing away on some corpses of dogs, whatever. And they're like, that's exciting. And they can see a church right above them up here. And this is where the bell's being rung, right above them. They're kind of walking in this way. You can see the cursor, I'm pretty sure. They walk in, the bell's being rung up here, but there's some wolves. And so one thing I want to point out is Modella, the rogue, down here, the little gnome, rides in Groklo Machno's backpack. One of the features of Modella is that she has incredibly low strength. I let my players do point buy. I think point buy is the ideal stat distribution. We'll get into that another time probably. But I allowed players to get an extra point to go to a base 7 of their score. So she has 7 strength, which is -2 modifier. And she says, I have very weak knees. Modell has very weak knees. Is very old or rickety or something. Who knows? Maybe they were broken before. Doesn't really know anymore. And so she rides in Groklo Machno's backpack. And now Groklo's a big 250-pound half-orc with plate armor. A little 30-pound gnome wearing leather. Not very heavy. And so Groklo walks up and he says, well, I like killing stuff, and just charges at the wargs. So we all roll initiative, and the fight begins. Now, wargs are pretty big, actually. These are all, 7 level 1 characters. Now, again, because point buy and the players are doing a pretty good job of putting reasonably optimal stats. Not perfect. Most of them are suboptimal. Modella especially so. But Groklo is like min-maxed. It's 16 strength, 16 con, 14 charisma. It's like the perfect possible stat distribution to be a paladin. And 10, 10, 8 for the other stats, right? So he runs up there. He's super tanky. He's like 13 health level 1 in like 18 AC. And runs up there to go fight one of the wargs. Well, the warg rolls really, really well on damage. And chomps in and gets like half of Groklo's hit points instantly, first hit. And wargs are really big creatures. They're like 150-pound giant wolf dogs, which means that when they tackle you, you need to make a strength save or you actually get knocked prone. Well, he fails his strength save, so in the very first round of combat, Gracla Machno is knocked on his ass by getting tackled by a giant wolf, and Modella is still riding in the backpack. Well, a 250-pound half-orc getting tackled by a 200-pound dog, I know I'm changing the numbers every time I say this, wearing plate armor, the orc, not the dog, just falls back and crushes Modella. So I make Modella take 20 feet of falling damage, roll the 2d6, goes down to 1 HP at the very start of combat. Hasn't done anything except gotten being fell upon, getting falled upon by a plate mail wielding half-orc, because I think that's reasonable. Hence, sometimes they take liberties with the rules, sometimes they don't. That was a liberty. I thought that was fair. So Modella goes down to 1 HP, with her like 10 con and d6 HP or whatever. I think it's what rogues have. Maybe it's 8. Who cares? Either way, she goes down to 1 HP and hasn't even taken a turn in combat yet. Goes, okay, that's bad. The Death Cleric gets his turn, Jesus, and he goes, well, this isn't anything that concerns me, and just says, I hold my action. I'm just going to chill. Okay. Endry's turn comes up, the aloof, haughty ice sorcerer, and goes, yeah, I'm just going to like take a stick and draw in the sand. Like, I'm just going to chill down here. I don't know these people. I don't care. Whatever. So the two casters just skip their first turn. Val Galandan, the hotshot wannabe cool guy archer that he is, goes, I want to climb the guard tower behind me. And the guard tower is like 15 feet tall. But, you know, they're made of stone. There's some stairs that go up part way. I'm like, okay, sure. Roll me an athletics check to see how well you climb the thing, because, I mean, it's not given to me, but I'm going to put the DC pretty low. So in his very first roll of Dungeons & Dragons ever, nat 20's it. So up he goes. Very first roll of ever playing Dungeons & Dragons, fall nat 20's, and just shoots up to a guard tower 50 feet in the air. Takes his longbow out, smacks one of the wargs. No big deal, deals a bunch of damage. Next round of combat comes around. I forget who else I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, Baguette walks up with his rapier. It's not sporting, by the way, to use any heavy weaponry, and it's not sporting to use a shield either, or anything in your offhand. Because, like, that's not sporting. So he's a rapier, no offhand, very much like a fencer. He walks up, makes his stabs at the wargs. Brother Olahand, the halfling monk, runs up, makes his punches as well. So, you know, 4 or 5 of these characters are in combat, and a couple of them aren't. Modella, I think, gets her turn and makes her hand crossbow shot. Again, Modella's not interested in the mechanics of the game very much, just not a player who really likes researching abilities and characters, and I'm okay with that. If you're upfront with me, I'm happy to put in the work for you. And again, first time playing, I like sent the player like, hey, here's the subclasses for rogues at level 3. Looked at it and was like, I'm sorry, my eyes glazed over. I actually can't. It's actually too much for me. I was like, okay, it's understandable. Overwhelming. Sure, that's fine. So anyway, pulls out her hand crossbow. I basically like rolled starting gold and bought equipment for her in the first place to try to make more sense for what the character was doing, because rogues can use hand crossbows but don't start with one. But like, she was definitely gonna use a hand crossbow because that like exactly fits this gnome tinker archetype, and that's how she was gonna get her damage, was like tinkering with her weaponry and learning how to use all that stuff. And like in her background, I shifted some things around so that she has tinker's tools and smithing tools, so you can like craft more stuff. I'm trying to play at the craftsmanship aspect of the character because that's probably gonna be more fun to the player. And we can get into that when she starts trying to craft stuff. So pulls out her hand crossbow, takes her shot. I think she actually crit her first auto attack as well. So like deals a bunch of damage to one of the wargs. We knocked the first one down in the first round of combat. Go to our second round of combat. Val's like third roll in the game is also a nat 20, so he crits one of the wargs. They manage to fell those, no big problem. They get through most of it, and then Gracla goes, okay, well, I'm hurt, and with lay on hands goes, I'm going to be healthy again, thanks very much. So he lay on hands himself for 5, goes back up to mostly full HP, went from like 4 to 9, and he's like, okay. So, okay, they clear out the wargs, and like, okay, cool, well, we cleared out some space. We've got that infernal ring of that bell up there, so they split the party. In their very first combat, 2 people chose to not fight at all, and in their second encounter, they split the party. So 3 people run up to into this little church steeple thing in the first floor. It's a 2-story building. They get to the first floor. They just see empty pews. They have not seen a single villager, by the way. They have only seen some wolves feasting on corpses and a bell ringing from this church. So they get the first floor, they see an empty church. There's a couple of religious idols in there. One of them to Myliki, who is goddess of the wilds and the patron goddess of rangers, which I didn't know at the time, but looked up later and made that matter for the second session. Either way, they grab that. They go up to the top floor where they see two goblins swinging on the church bell rope. And they're just kind of wee floating around just doing this. And so Grocklo, immediately seeing one, hucks a javelin, misses the first strike. Goblins get into initiative. They fight. It's two goblins. It's pretty free. They kill them off. They loot a bunch of stuff. There's like empty vials of holy water. There's some gold. They realize the goblins have been looting the town. They kill off some goblins. They go around the rest of the town basically, and they, again, every single time they see that all the homesteads are pretty much empty. There's no people here at all. There's a couple of like pigs running around, like left out of their pen. There's some chickens running around, one of which have been captured by a goblin, but they kill about a dozen goblins kind of running around through town. In the midst of one of these fights, though, on the eastern edge of the town, Brother Olahand gets knocked down. Brother Olahand gets knocked incapacitated and uses 2.0. The Death Cleric kind of looks over, does a spare the dying, and kind of walks on. Now, as a cleric and as a Death Cleric, certainly does have the capability of healing, chooses not to. In addition, coming into this, I had skipped a couple of steps. In one of the houses they had looted, they had found some healing potions. Endry was one of the ones to be the most inquisitive, and so he's often the first one to come into contact with this kind of stuff. And if no one's around, he just kind of pockets it and takes it for himself. And then say, oh yeah, I found like 12 gold here, and like divvies it up. But like the gemstones and the potions of healing and whatnot, he's kind of slinking away into his backpack and not letting anyone know he has them. So he's being a bit of a klepto, not sharing with the party. So they're vaguely aware that Grocklo can heal. He did it, but of course he's out of healing now. They're vaguely aware that Jesus can heal, and he doesn't. And they don't know that Endry can heal, and of course he doesn't either. Amidst exploring this town, they realize that there's giant rocks embedded in the ground. And these are like 15-ton boulders. Like, they don't budge. These are gigantic things, and they actually see evidence of of contact with the ground. Like, this isn't Stonehenge where they were constructs. Like, these landed. There's like holes in the houses. There's actually dead people underneath a couple of them. Like, they've been actually artillery struck or something, which is a small spoiler, but they figured it out pretty quickly anyway. Essentially these like artillery strikes of rocks that have just destroyed some of the buildings in the town. They've killed about 8 people of various makes and models throughout the town. And 2 of these rocks have been lodged into a big inn at the top of the town. And so they go to check this thing out. They see a goblin already dead with a crossbow bolt in his chest, and they do nothing to investigate that, by the way. There's conspicuously a dead goblin killed by tools, and they never put 2 and 2 together. In the same building, they find a blonde woman named Kella. Kella says that she just woke up when they came in the room, that she was, shocked that this, town is suddenly empty, that, yeah, she noticed the falling rocks, and then debris knocked her unconscious, and she just woke up. She's like, I've just been here scared, and just plays on I don't know what the hell's going on, but, she's like, I'm just here at the inn. I was traveling, like, I'm here now, and I don't know what's going on, basically. They don't put 2 and 2 together that the only living humanoid in the entire city and the crossbow bolt goblin killed might be related. But they, I describe what she's wearing and everything else, and that she has this like cool sort of this pet snake wrapped around her right wrist, a little winged snake. And what's interesting is one of the characters asks, do I know what this snake is? And I'm like, okay, well, roll history, because he with guidance, because cleric. And all the proficiencies with a total score of 20, which I'll then give you. And so, oh yeah, you know that winged snakes are infamously the chosen messengers of the Zentarum. The Zentarum are a spy network. Most people have heard of the Zentarum. They're not that unheard of or anything. they're the overarching thieves guild, spy guild, assassins guild, you name it. If you want something untoward or unseeming done, that's kind of who you hire. And you're like, yeah, Winged Snake is that's kind of the calling card. So he kind of backs off, tells everyone. And they spent about 30 minutes in session saying, who are you? My name's Kella. I'm a traveler. Why are you here? I'm traveling. That's not true. I'm a traveler. I'm traveling. That's not true. I'm a traveler and I'm traveling? No, you're lying to us. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Leave my room, please. And they never raise the stakes. It takes them a while to figure out, like, oh, Grocklow comes up. Tired of this BS. I will kill you if you don't start taking answers. We know you're part of the Zentarum. And she goes, that'll work. Here's who I am and why I'm here. Right, like immediately you raise the stakes. Now she starts talking. So they figure that one out, and off they go, figuring out that yes, she was here to take over the town, non-violently if possible. It's very fortunate that everyone is evacuated. Thanks for killing the goblins, by the way. I really appreciate that. Makes it easier. But yeah, we're here to, you can see, by the way, there's like a bunch of really tall walls around the city, so really well defensible place. There's even a built-in moat. This is a great place to hole up, essentially. So yeah, we want to take this over as a bastion of power. We good? And they go, okay, makes sense, and leave her to her things, basically. They managed to find some loot. They like open up a chest that had a lock in it, and instead of picking the lock, Grocklow just like cleaves the lock with his sword. I gave him an AC of 15 to not break open the chest. Then he hit it with like a 17. So yep, you hit the lock instead of breaking the chest. So they get like a healing potion out of it. That's where the healing potion came from. They get a helmet sized for a dwarf. None of them are dwarves. Not that it would matter anyway, because armor is taken care of in a different system essentially. And yeah, so they get a little bit of stuff and they go, okay, well, we've looted the inn. They kill the rest of that dozen goblins. One thing that Jesus tried to do was cast, I think, Suggestion on Kella, but the save failed, so he's down to only one spell slot, and that's part of why he didn't choose to heal Brother Olahand when he went down, because he was saving his spell economy. But no one else kind of had that reasoning or saw that. They just saw him coldly say, yeah, we're going to spare the dying, but later. And Brother Olahand rolled a 4 on the D4 for how many hours till you wake up, so he's just out for the rest of the session, which felt bad for him as the player, but what are you going to do? In the meantime, there was a stable to the far east over here that Endry walked over and really, really, really wanted to, after clearing the goblins out, tame a horse. He wanted a jet black horse, so I had him roll a d8, and on an 8, there is one. There wasn't. But there's a dark gray because he got a 7. And he tries to tame the dark gray horse, and he doesn't roll well at all in animal handling. Over the course of the next 2 sessions, he makes about 10 animal handling rolls and never gets a 15 or higher. So he kept trying, and the horse kept saying no to him. Eventually, later on down the line, he gets there, but that's a spoiler. So he tries to take a horse, doesn't get one for a while, clean out the rest of the town, and they start getting pretty late into the day. Over here is a broken bridge into a keep. So this is like the big town. There's a bunch of buildings and whatnot, and then there's a bridge right here, 5 feet wide, and there's a stone that chunked out the middle right there into a keep down at this bottom end, also encircled by walls. So they see that there's a keep down to the bottom, but they kill off a whole bunch of goblins. They clear out the town. There's like a windmill up here. There's like a house with like some locked shutters that they managed to open up. There's another one like over here that has like a cellar underneath the floorboards that they rolled really well in perception on and managed to find and cleaned a bunch of stuff. So they ransack really the whole place. Endry at one point casts friends on a goblin that he sees, and the goblin, becomes friends with him. Then the rest of the party walks in the room and immediately attack. So the friendly goblin just gets killed anyway. And so they round up and kill about a dozen goblins, and thus ends pretty much their first adventuring day. And we get later and later into the evening. Brother Olahand is still unconscious, and I say, okay, to the players, you're going to be able to get yourselves a long rest. At the end of the long rest, you'll be level 2. Mostly because I wanted all the players to be able to be involved, and yeah, basically it felt appropriate to give everyone a dream sequence. One thing that one of the players had requested was to have some of the leveling up mechanics be in character, that it feels a little weird to just like suddenly get powers with no explanation or acting or anything of any sort. And so I said, okay, I'll try to do my best to give you all, cutscenes or something that help you feel like you've leveled up and to make those things make sense to you. And so on the first night, as everyone hits level 2, that's when the Ranger and Paladin learn spell casting. It's when you start getting fighting styles and the various, fighters and Rangers as well. A lot of things happen often at level 2. You get a lot of powers there. That's like the first big level up, obviously, but it's actually, I feel like, a pretty important level up. 2 and 1 feel quite different. And so I gave everyone a small cutscene to sort of explain what happened while they were unconscious, and now they've come back up. The 2 elves who can just transfer 4 hours instead of sleeping for 8 kind of kept watch and took their time sitting in some of the various guard towers, looking over across the darkness, and that's fine. And so for Baguette, this haughty high elf fighter, he believes, he was taught, doesn't really believe very much in one of the big deities to elves, Sehanine Moonbow. And Sehanine Moonbow is this elven deity who oversees like journeys and travel and whatnot, but is also known for giving signs, sort of giving portents out in the night sky. The real clergy of the religion will like spend their time like trying to force themselves to dream to interface with her, but she can also just send out signs to whoever she wants to. And so as he's watching over in the night, he's holding on his trance and looking out into the sky, I say, well, you were never really that big of a believer, but you see a shooting star kind of arc over the new moon in the night sky. It's a very dark night. And you're happy to be at night. You're an elf. It's a natural advantage. You can see in the dark. It's not a big problem. Even new moon or not, it's fine. You don't need any light to really be able to see. And it's been good for you over these years. But you see this sort of bowstring arc over the new moon, and that's actually a sign from Sehanine Moonbow, and actually in canon it is. And her sign over the new moon means bad things. It means a time of strife. It means a time of loss, of great change. And I give it to him kind of in character, say, you've heard of this happening only 100 years ago, back when your homeland was taken over. Back when the Demon Fae came and took over the Evermeet, the Isle of Evermeet. And try to sort of give a little bit of panic that stuff's happening. And what's great is because stuff's happening, it's going to line right up with your desire to make a name for yourself. But this is a little scary. This is not a good sign. This is not like opportunities here. You're like, oh crap, stuff's going to die. For Brother Olahand, he wakes up from his unconscious stupor and gets his long rest. And monks get ki at level 2. That's why I say it's a pretty big deal, because you can suddenly start doing flurry of blows and things like that. And because he was never really fully revived, I tell him that, well, you woke up kind of alone in the dark, no one around you, and you had been in this monastery for so long, and yet despite all this time studying, you never learned anything. Like, you can punch with your right and left hand, but like monks don't get anything at level 1. They're not even monks, really. Aside from, I guess they get their unarmored like bonuses, but still, right, you get hit less, whatever. Say, well, once you saw yourself actually start to die, you'd never been knocked down to 0 hit points mechanically before. I'm not saying that in those words, and you sort of felt your life force start to ebb away. And as it came back and it sort of reinsurges, refills inside you, we'll say, you're like, that's what ki is. That's what my sensei was telling me about. It's this life force. Now I understand. Now I get what ki is. I get it. He's level 2. He can tap into ki. And I thought that was actually really nice, kind of coinciding right there. For Endry, essentially he's being spoken to. He doesn't know this, but I'm going to tell you. Well, I can put it in a way that kind of makes sense. But he has this dream where he sees like the faintest outline of like maybe a constellation or like the Northern Lights or something, like some phenomenon in the night sky, and then it whisks away, and then something else, or maybe the same thing, he's not sure, comes back, and it's a silhouette, all shaded in darkness. You can't tell who or what it would be, just this cloaked humanoid figure, and you can only make out this this diamond or crystal or something pendant, a six-pointed snowflake. That's the only distinguishable feature that shows up on this figure, and this icy breath kind of flows into him. And it doesn't, like, he knows it's cold, but he doesn't shiver. He's like, yeah, that's fine. It's cold. I'm used to that. And mechanically, as a sorcerer, he now has sorcery points. But some force of cold has taken notice and granted him some power. And now he is a second-level Draconic Bloodline Ice Sorcerer. Groclomachno has his own dream sequence, and at level 2 is when Paladins start getting some of their divine features. This is when they learn spell casting. Their Lay on Hands gets to 10 hit points, and I forget if they get anything else. I think they get their fighting style. Either way, though, now that he has magic available to him, I feel like it's time to kind of have him contact with his god, Tempest. And he'd been going out trying to wage wars before, but never really been given notice. And so he has this dream where he sees a figure kind of run over to the church and just smash one of the pews. Now, this church was basically to a bunch of, like, lawful or at least good deities like Myliki, who's just like, yes, nature is great and wonderful, and, you know, okay, it's more of a chaotic good with rangers, but there's one of the other sort of very friendly, positive gods is sort of in that shrine as well, and he just breaks one of the pews, and out pops his little miniature dagger with ornamentation on the sides of like etched in flames. An on fire sword is the sigil marking sign, I'm forgetting the actual word for it, of Tempest, the god of war. And as he wakes from the dream sequence, he realizes that it wasn't someone else doing that, that was him, and he's holding onto it right now, and now he has spell casting as a second level paladin. Modella actually, as a player, missed our next session, so she gets her in-character cutscene later on, but essentially wakes up later on in the next day, and just, like, for a character with, like, really weak knees and low constitution and really is not physically adept, actually just feels really good. Just actually, you know, wow, you're just waking up, but your heart rate's coming down, right? Like, normally, you know, when you're asleep, your heart rhythms are lower, your breathing's lower, and you come to consciousness. She comes to consciousness and is settling down, which, you know, I'm not sure if she takes as unusual or not, but I'm trying to give hints by doing that. That this character with short-term memory loss, I'm hoping to play up as whenever Modella thinks she's asleep or the player misses a session, Modella was there the whole time, but doesn't remember. And so if, you know, the previous session ended in a fight, Modella was fighting. She was doing all kinds of combat. The player and character don't remember this, though. The other characters do, and the other players do. I tell them this every session. Hey, keep in mind, we're going to play the Modella short-term memory loss thing again. Modella was fighting with you guys. Keep that in mind. And then eventually, at some point, you're going to start having disconnects where I can start saying, oh, no, she did this, like, really brave deed, or, you know, picked up something, or whatever else is missing, that kind of stuff. And I'm hoping that'll be exciting later on when we start getting those disconnects. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but, you know, that's kind of the hope I'm getting at with this one. So Modella wakes up, feels a bit more loose and limber. You know, second level rogues get access to cunning action and stuff. So, okay, cool. But, you know, rogues are pretty simple to level up. There's no, like, deity interacting, at least not yet. I'm deciding whether or not the ones who are not super religious are going to have greater beings vying for their attention or not. Maybe not. I'm not sure just yet. Either way, we go down to Vol, who has his own trance sequence, and at level 2, Rangers get their fighting style as well as their spellcasting. And, you know, by Kismet's sake, there was a sigil as this sort of porcelain unicorn symbol, which is the symbol of Myliki, the ranger goddess, and you're drawn to this figurine. You feel like you just need to have it. That, you know, up until you hit level 2, rangers are really just nature sensitive fighters. There's nothing really rangery about them other than, like, yeah, you kind of remember beasts pretty well, and, you know, it turns out you're from the swamp, and yeah, you're pretty good at navigating the swamp. Cool. Right? They're not very special, and that's when you start getting spellcasting, you start becoming a little bit more interesting. And so I tell them, hey, you know, you're really drawn to this sigil that Myliki has. There's a bit of fun things going on here because the person who actually had picked up Myliki's actual sigil or little trophy was Modella. And Modella misses the session where we're doing this, at least misses part of the session while we're doing this. So none of the characters and none of the players are like, well, it's not, I don't know, I don't have it. Oh wait, maybe Modella has it. And this is someone like, and I'm like, yes, I'm sure she does. It's fine. And so like goes and grabs it, right? Modella thinks in character that she's asleep. Vol grabs it, now has this essentially spellcasting focus. I'm just kind of saying by fiat, yep, you've got the spellcasting focus, you're good, bam, you're level 2 ranger. You have Hunter's Mark, you have Cure Wounds, you're good to go, we're happy. Okay. And then our final one was for Jesus. Jesus, who I'm trying very hard to play this selfish versus acting in the way my God wants me to angle. And so what happens with him is he has, again, dream sequence. Well, I'm doing it all over the long rest because it lines up really well. Everyone's asleep. You're going to get level 2 when you wake up. This all sounds pretty good. And I play back the memory of him sort of seeing Brother Olahan bleeding on the ground and just doing the spare the dying cantrip. Not a cure wounds, not a heal, just whatever. I'll see you later, and walks past and gives him, 3 seconds of his effort. And I play that vision back for him. And then as he walks away, I tell him, you feel a large beast jump onto you. You're immediately tackled to the ground. You feel hot breath in your neck, and you feel this heavy scratch coming down your back. Like talons or claws or something are raking their way through your flesh into the muscle and as deep as they can get. And you start bleeding from these wounds in your dream, and your life fades away and you die again. And as you wake up, you're not dead. You touch your back, and it's sore. You've actually got these scars on your back now. It hurts to touch. They're very tender. And as you reach back your hand, you look in your other, and you've got this tooth, a long sort of cat-like canine fang, jet black fang in your other hand. And I say, okay, well, this is going to be your spellcasting focus. This is what you're going to use for Channel Divinity. Clerics get Channel Divinity at level 2. They get some of their subclass features at 2. You get some of them at 1 as a cleric, you get some of them at 2 as a cleric. And I say, okay, this is yours. And so the part I'm going to sort of explain to you guys is, so again, I did a lot of reading up on anyone who had a deity. I read up on those deities' lore. And Kelemvor, the god of death, was a human in life and was cursed. And the curse manifested essentially as you are not allowed to do anything out of the goodness of your heart. You need to ask for payment for anything that you do. You must be a mercenary. You cannot just be good. If you do something out of the goodness of your heart, you are essentially uncontrollably shapeshifted into a werecat, and you're going to go crazy for a while, and you're going to kill stuff, and then go back to being a human. Is more or less how that works. And then Kelemvor, when he ascends to godhood later on, and this was about 110 years ago in game terms, he was actually still very human as a god and tried to be, hey, if you were a good person, I will judge you kindly and you'll go to the good parts of the afterlife. If you were a bad person or you didn't live up to your faith properly and did a bunch of bad deeds, I'm going to punish you and send you to a more negative part of the afterlife. And also the fact that he had clearly chosen Jesus to resurrect, that pun is not lost on me in any way. I'm sort of having Kelemvor kind of inflict some of that want on him, because certainly the curse of having to always ask for payment was not something that he wanted. It was a curse thrust upon Kelemvor, and he didn't have a choice about it. And it's kind of funny that he then resurrected a cut purse as this sort of focus of his will and of his powers. That you've got someone who only does things for money, being now the incarnation, the next sort of warrior in line of Kelemvor. So that's a kind of a fun duality there, and that's one I'm going to keep playing up. But being so involved in how people act, I'm playing Kelemvor very aggressively into Jesus's actions here and saying, no, you save people. It wasn't his time to die. How dare you just leave him? You need to bring them back up. Be better. I brought you back so you can be better, redeem yourself. And so he gets attacked for it. And that's kind of how it's going to start playing out a little bit. I don't want to just like immediately remove all character choice from him. I still want to give him the chance to be a bit good and bad without just losing control of his own character. So I've got to find the ways to sort of walk that back when it needs to happen. But that is how that went. And so they all wake up the next day. They are all level 2. They've got their focuses. Kella is still up here in this tavern, or inn, rather. We're going to say it's both, because there is no tavern officially in the source book. And they're going to go and cross this bridge to go see what's over in the keep. That's when the second session started. That's when the second day started, and we'll get to that next time. Thanks for watching. Please give me feedback. And yeah, I'm going to have a lot of fun probably recounting these episodes. See ya.